Today, we're going to be talking about the post office scandal. Easily, at the moment, one of the UK's most historic miscarriages of justice. Well, in its history, unfortunately. And it has really, mostly because of the recent drama that came out about it, and we'll get to that in a moment, that has made people really take attention as to what have happened, and has even motivated MPs to really finally get there and do something about this. But I do have quite a few international viewers, so some of you might be thinking, "What on earth is this post office scandal? How did this happen to these sub postmasters?" And how do we get to this point? So we'll be doing a very quick TDLR. Trust me, we're going to have to be quick because trying to go through the entire scandal, and bear in mind, this is almost at this point over an almost 2 decade scandal in the works, starting all the way back in the year 2000. Exactly. So this has been going on for a long time. So it would take quite a long time to try and fully explain the full situation. But to give you the quick TDLR, essentially in the year 2000, the post office brought in a brand new system from Fujitsu called the Horizon system. This was installed into many sub post offices. It was sort of a new accounting software, sort of a do-it-all system sold to the post office, again, from Fujitsu. And we'll be getting to them later. Don't worry about that. So this whole system, again, meant to help the sub postmasters run their offices, do their accounts, etc., etc. But when they are putting in their numbers, doing all this stuff, they are finding that they are coming up with error messages that they are sometimes hundreds or even thousands of pounds missing from their accounts, that they are underdrawn. And what initially ended up happening was, because the post office has its own jurisdiction when it comes to sort of crimes with the mail. This is very much a historical hangover from when the post office was still a nationalized sort of institution. Kind of made sense that they got to sort of pursue anyone who sort of interfered with the post. But this is some sort of historical hangover, something else that we'll be discussing in a moment as well. So they started acting very, very aggressively with all these sub postmasters, trying to say that, oh no, this is only happening to you and no one else. In the meantime, it is worth noting that from 1999 to 2000, glitches of particular IT systems, or at least crimes in this, went from 10 to 80. So bear in mind, this was a noticeable increase that someone should have noticed and at least taken, attention of. But the post office pursued these people. It took over at least 300 of these sub postmasters to court, which was again one of the things that was covered in the recent documentary, in the recent drama. And this scandal rumbled and rumbled and rumbled on till even the post office is at a point where it now tries to deny victims of this scandal who were accused, who in some cases, to avoid accusation, paid out hundreds of thousands of pounds, even though, again, it was not their fault. It was a computer error and a system that was causing this error, which the post office was saying, no, this system is working perfectly, even though, as we were to later learn, they knew about these errors. They'd seem to, well, not care. So that's sort of the quick TDLR of the whole post office scandal. Like I say, there are a lot more indicators, shall we say, and a lot more stuff that went on. If you would like to learn more about the post office scandal and all the other stuff that has happened, because trust me, there's a lot of shenanigans that the post office got up to, which should be investigated, very, very much so. But I do recommend The Private Eye. The Private Eye released a really long article all about this, covering sort of how this all started through all the reporting, even up to now. And of course, if you have been an avid reader of The Private Eye, you know full well that Ian Hislop basically has run a story about the post office scandal in almost every single issue of the private eye since he started reporting about it many years ago. And and reporting yet another thing we'll get into in a moment. But before we do get into the rest of this and how we can look at, helping these people who have been victims of this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. There are links down below, the Patreon page, the One Foundation link called Buy Me Coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course the Pony Club again down below as well. So thank you very much to everyone again who does support the channel. And of course, yeah, let's get on with this. So how on earth do we help these victims? Well, there's a number of things, first of all, we can do. Currently, MPs are really talking about trying to pass an extreme, what they call an extreme law, but it's again, it's just the type of language that's been used. It's a law that sort of gets expedited, sort of pushed to the front of the queue. Of course, in a case of extreme circumstances that would essentially exonerate many of these postmasters who got taken to court, many who still to this day have not received apology letters from the post office about how they were treated. Again, something I think the post office should come forward about and admit their culpability in a lot of these cases, and know what happened, and they themselves should be held to account, which is again the next part of this. How should this be investigated? Well, ultimately, this should be investigated. It's something that should be heavily looked at, and I think that this goes beyond just a normal inquiry. We need to really make this inquiry have teeth. This should become a royal inquiry. After all, you know, post office is one of the few institutions that gets to use the crown as a stamp, as its logo. This is something that even the monarchy themselves should probably care about. The fact that something that bears their moniker has been brought into such disrepute. But why a royal inquiry? Why not just a normal inquiry? Well, this is because the powers of a royal inquiry would have. It would have subpoena power. It could go out and gather and investigate documents. Again, a normal inquiry could do that, but if it's a royal inquiry doing it, then there's less chance of it being sort of held up. They've got more powers to sort of compel sort of witnesses, handing over evidence, etc., etc. So I think this is something that should really happen, not just a normal inquiry, but a sort of a royal inquiry into this. Like I say, I think it needs it, and I think especially to the victims, I think being able to expedite that process of getting that evidence, getting those witness testimony on this, I think is going to be very, very helpful. The other thing, of course, is compensation to many of these people. As we said in the beginning, many of these people, to try and avoid going to court, were trusting that it was their fault, that they were doing something wrong. So they were paying hundreds of extra thousands of pounds into these systems just to make sure that they were keeping solvent. But as we said, sometimes it would be hundreds, sometimes it could reach into the hundreds of thousands of pounds that they were sort of coming up short with. So this was by no means a feasible exercise to keep going. Many people, of course, eventually had to sort of declare bankruptcy and wind up the business. So this is a real part of the whole serious part of it that the victims sort of have experienced. Of course, the massive sort of financial losses they suffered, the sort of the families' pressure that they were put under, the mental health pressure they were put under. Some, as we said, went on to commit suicide. There was a story just yesterday on LBC of one of these former postmasters who felt so ashamed of apparently what he felt he had done at that time. He left the country. Like, that's how ashamed he felt about it. But one of you were asking, well, what about the reporting? If this is such a historical case, which has been known about, bear in mind, for quite some time, and it was only because of this drama that had been released very recently that people particularly have really taken this story to heart. It's because the reporting itself has been almost very, in a way, difficult, I think, to get across. And I think it was the drama that really got the story across to people, to what people had actually been going through and what the post office had been doing to people. I think people were sort of shocked by, especially the scene where you see sort of the main character being interrogated by what was essentially a a police officer for the post office. Um, so it has sort of captured, I think, more people's imaginations. But the reporting for this, um, as Ian Hislop also said very recently, I think it was on Andrew Marr, he said the only reason this actually got reported, like the very first reports of what was going on in the post office, was in a article in Computer Weekly. This was a periodical about computers that would report computer news. It was the only source at that time to which they were sort of paying attention to it. And it was because that, Ian Hislop saw that and realized actually the extent of this scandal that was going on was why he started reporting about it in Private Eye. And then, of course, he started to learn more and more as this went on, the true depth of this scandal. And then eventually, finally, this was picked up by a BBC reporter who eventually made a panorama documentary about this. And of course, he wrote a book. And of course, the book, the drama that was based on his reading is based on that book. So, as much as we see this has been a very much ongoing issue, an ongoing issue that many MPs have been talking about, have been trying to sort out. But in many cases, Ed Daly, of course, he got caught up in this. But as he said, well, how could I, know what was really going on? Because I was being told, what I was concerned, that, you know, I was being told the truth. And he was being, lied to by the post office. So there are an absolute ton of questions about this that really need to be answered. And the other thing that we have to be careful of, and we must be careful of this, is that there are a lot of right-wing Tory MPs trying to take example of this as this is how we can, shall we say, damage the civil service. They are trying to latch this onto, this is sort of blaming the civil service for these mistakes. Now, bear in mind, the post office is not a state-run entity anymore. It is a privately owned sort of entity, but many of these right-wing Tory MPs trying to. Currently, it doesn't seem they're succeeding, but it is something that we have to watch out for. So I will at least worth mentioning, or at least bringing up at this point, that we have to be careful about some of the things that they are suggesting about what should happen and how they can sort of fix this. But as we said, this will probably go on for potentially quite some time. But I think to many of the victims, this day, this media storm for them has been a long time coming. And to be honest, rather sooner than later. But what is shocking, and I think this is very worth bringing up as well. A. Thompson, I saw this on his Threads account. I saw him bringing this up. That imagine if Nigel Farage had been, a victim of this post office scandal. This would have been solved in 3 weeks. The right wing Fleet Street media would have gone crazy over this and been covering this non-stop until there had been a solution and a resolution to this. And it just goes to show you, really, here, this has been honestly a terrible, I think, lack of journalistic interest in what should have been reported many, many years ago of a very serious scandal. And unfortunately, that has not happened. Now, it has finally happened, at least, but it took a TV drama for people to really pay attention to it and actually go, oh, actually, this was quite a serious scandal. Maybe we should, make sure that these, victims do get the justice they deserved. But at least they are now finally getting that justice. And by the looks of it, MPs are now looking at this, how we can do this, how we can sort of help solve these things, how we can sort of expedite many of these processes, because many of the people who were sort of taken to court in this case are completely innocent. Um, but of course, that still has had a lot of consequences on them and their lives, etc. So there needs to be a lot of stuff looked into this to make sure that these victims, are properly compensated and that, they do get justice for what they went through. Um, and that does mean looking very heavily at what was going on at the post office during this time. As I've already said, a royal inquiry into this, I think, is more than warranted. And I said, why royal inquiry? Why not just normal inquiry? Well, again, uh, royal inquiry has a lot more powers that they can use in these examples. So again, we'll see what happens, but luckily, it does now finally seem that justice is now dawning to many of these victims of the post office. So, uh, you know, long time coming for many people. A lot of people have really waited, still to this day, denied justice. And even more people are now coming forward saying, oh, I used to be a post office submaster and I used to pay, you know, an extra £2,000 maybe a week to try and, make sure that the accounts were balanced because the system was telling me that we were, £2,000, missing from the accounts, etc. So there's still a lot of victims still coming forward from this. So how big an eventual scandal will this finally become? Well, we'll probably find out in the ensuing sort of weeks and sort of months after this. But this scandal, again, still far from over, but it has been a long, long time brewing, and it's finally now all come out. Thanks very much to, again, a TV drama. But again, sometimes these things work in, mysterious ways, I suppose. But as always, thank you very much, of course, for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.